Welcome, everyone. Just going to give it a few minutes for people to join. All right. Welcome, everybody. We are so happy to have you here today on a very important topic, our teens and COVID-19. We're going to be talking today with licensed clinicians and Dr. Amy Mezulis and her team at Uplift Navigator to talk about really how we're navigating these times together in our teens' mental health. So welcome to everyone. I'm going to launch a poll as we have people join us. And this will be recorded, so you'll be able to share and play back and get all the good nuggets that you're going to be getting today. So let me launch that poll right now, and then we're going to have our panelists do their introductions. All right. All right. We've got we've got a good group of people on right now. So welcome, everybody. So I just want to first do a little bit of introductions. I'm Anne Taylor Hartzell. I am the host of Culture Shift podcast. Dr. Amy Mezulis is a friend of mine, but also it has been a podcast guest for me. Recently did a podcast episode on social distancing and the impact on our teens that we're navigating this all together in the country, in Seattle, around the world. You can find a copy of that podcast on upliftnavigator.com or cultureshiftpodcast.com. And today we're going to provide some really thoughtful advice to help navigate families and administrators and different educational systems through this important and difficult time. So with that, I would like to introduce our team, Dr. Amy Mezulis, and each person is going to do a quick round of introductions so you can get to know the team.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne, and thanks so much for hosting this for us. Hello to everyone out there. We know from the guest list that we have parents watching with teens. We have some educators and administrators from some of our local school districts. We have first responders from some of our fire districts. And we have some clinicians probably working with teens and young adults. So we're really happy to have you all. So my name is Amy Mezulis. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. My specialty is adolescent mental health. I've been on the faculty at Seattle Pacific University for 15 years now, where I do research and I teach in the PhD program there. I've been funded by the National Institutes of Health for the last 7 years to study how physiological, cognitive, and emotional responses to both stressful and positive events predict depression and self-injury among adolescents. But I'm also a licensed clinician, and I maintain a small private practice where I treat teens and young adults struggling with depression, anxiety, self-injury, and disordered eating. In my clinical work, I take a predominantly evidence-based, skills-focused approach when I'm working with teens and young adults. And by evidence-based, I mean that I take the best evidence that we have from the scientific literature about what causes and can treat mental health problems, but then I work with each individual client to personalize that evidence to their unique personality and situation. And by skills-focused, I mean that I see my goal as a clinician to help clients build their own personal skill set for managing stress, regulating their emotions, and building the life that they want to lead. And with all those goals in mind, recently I founded Uplift Navigator to make it easier for families to access care for their teens and young adults. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Separate from my professional life, I'm also a parent to 2 high school age daughters. And so I'm personally navigating through all the challenges of being a parent during this time. Along with many of you, I'm trying to support my own girls through remote learning and social distancing. And in fact, my oldest is a senior, so we're dealing with the loss of all the expected rites of passage of the senior year. So she's not getting prom, she's not getting a choir trip, there won't be a graduation. And so I empathize both professionally and personally with all the parents out there listening. Thanks.
All right, Michelle, do you want to go next?
Make sure everyone can actually hear me. So my name is Michelle Kuhn. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work at Children's and at Uplift Navigator. In my work, I mostly work with children, families, and teens, and specialize in problems with anxiety, mood, and neurodevelopment. So that's disorders like ADHD. My favorite part about my work is I really view my work as working with a teen, but also kind of being invited to join that whole families team when I work with kids. And that's absolutely my favorite part. to everyone that's on the call, you guys are here because you're part of your kids' team and you're doing what you can to support them through these really uncertain times. And I just view that as such a privilege to be invited onto each of your teams. So I get to support the parents in understanding and supporting their child, and the teen in understanding themselves better and knowing what to do to feel better. My favorite part of my job is getting to see the benefits that come out of that team approach for every single member of the team, not just the teen, but also the parents, and sometimes also other members of the team, like school staff. So thank you for being here, and I'm excited to share what I can and also learn from all of you.
All right, Jordan Skaliski.
Yes, so I'm Jordan Skaliski. I'm a master's level clinician working on my PhD in clinical psychology. My primary area of focus is working with older adolescents and young adults, such as college students, who are primarily experiencing stress, anxiety, depression, and/or substance use. I primarily take a cognitive behavioral and mindfulness approach. I love what I do because I love helping others find hope. I love seeing other people light up and find meaning in their lives and purpose. When I'm not working with clients, I'm either hiking or paddleboarding when possible, playing video games and forever trying to potty train my puppy. So.
Awesome. And certainly not least, we have Thomas Penke.
Hi, my name is Thomas Panka. I'm a master's level clinician, also a student at Seattle Pacific University where I'm earning my PhD. And I've had experience working with kids, teens, adolescents, college students for a variety of different concerns. But my biggest focus is teens who have problems with anxiety, perfectionism, can come up in a lot of different ways. And a lot of what I do involves getting teens to slowly challenge their thoughts, their fears, and eventually get them to conquer them. And I just really love how after a few weeks, a few months of working with them, you really do see big changes in stress reduction and in getting them to feel just more confident overall. And so I do that with meditation and mindfulness and breathing exercises, all those good aspects of therapy. And when I'm not doing school or therapy, I like to travel to just explore around Seattle and play music.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I think it's helpful for everyone to kind of get a background of what your specialty is and your interests. So I'm looking at the poll in progress, and we've got about 40% that are looking at what worries them most about their teens is anxiety and stress. With the what's stressful about school closures is falling behind in school or other activities. And about 15% of you are actually joining with your teens today. So welcome. We're so glad you're here. And then resources, we're certainly going to have some reading materials and follow-up, free resources for you to follow up and read on your own. So with that, I want to encourage you to click on the Q&A and submit questions, because we're going to have a free Q&A session at the end. But with that, we're going to shift to our first question, which is for Amy. And so Amy, you and your team at SPU, that's Seattle Pacific University for those outside joining us outside the region. What is the early data from the SPU COVID-19 study that you're seeing? What is it telling us about the current mental health of our teens? You're on mute too, Amy. There you go.
You'd think after all these weeks we'd be better at this.
Oh, Zoom.
So thanks for the question. So 5 weeks ago, when the statewide lockdown in Washington was first being announced, my team and I initiated a study looking at the effects of COVID-19 and specifically the effects of social distancing on mental health. And so in the past 5 weeks, we've collected data on over 2,200 participants. About a quarter of those are here in Washington state, but they're also nationwide. And about 500 of those participants are teens and young adults between the ages of 14 and 24. So we're getting a pretty good snapshot of what this is looking like right now in terms of mental health among teens and young adults. One of the questions I was particularly interested in was whether teens and young adults would be particularly susceptible to increased mental health problems as a result of school closures and stay-at-home requirements, because we hypothesized that this population, sort of teens and young adults, in particular need the social contact of regular interactions with their peers and also teachers and coaches. But this is a time when peer relationships are really important, and school is a huge venue for where those peer interactions happen. And our initial analyses does confirm our hypothesis that teens and young adults are especially vulnerable to certain mental health problems right now. And in particular, what we're seeing is elevated rates of loneliness and depression among 14 to 24-year-olds compared with those who are 25 or older. And in fact, and this is a little bit scary statistic, so just hold your horses, 2/3 of the 14 to 24-year-olds in our sample are showing what we would consider to be clinically significant depression symptoms. So symptoms above a level where we would say they're of concern and potentially problematic. And I was noticing a couple of the questions popping up in the Q&A just at the bottom of my screen, and those questions about things like motivation, things like sort of isolating or saying that this doesn't affect me. Those are all actually really common presentations of depression symptoms. Saying that you're bored, saying things don't matter, not wanting to do things are very common presentations. And so the effect of the current situation on mental health right now in our data looks specific to loneliness and depression. We're not seeing that anxiety looks any higher for our teens and young adults than it does for other adults. It's very possible that the types of anxiety and stress are different, that the things that are making older adults anxious and stressed are different than the things that are making our teens and young adults stressed. I think that's very possible. Our data doesn't allow us to see that. Overall levels of anxiety and stress don't seem different by age, but loneliness and depression really do. So we noticed that. And then our next sort of question was, well, what's causing that? Why in particular would teens and young adults be vulnerable to loneliness and depression right now? And again, we came back to our hypothesis that what's happening for this population is that those in-person interactions with peers have gone down, and what's filling up the space is a lot of time alone, but also a lot of time on social media. And we actually think that this may be one of the reasons why a lot of teens and young adults are feeling more lonely and depressed. Social media is really tricky. And again, I have 2 teenage daughters who spend an incredible amount of time on Snapchat and Instagram. Because on the one hand, it's a way to stay connected with your peers. And we would certainly not want our kids to not have any form of being able to stay connected. But on the other hand, the quality of that connection isn't very high. It's not typically meaningful social interaction that's happening over social media. It can be pretty superficial. And in fact, that's what our study seems to be showing. So teens and young adults are reporting greater decreases in time with friends compared to older adults, and in turn, greater increases in time on social media relative to older adults. That time on social media, in turn, is predicting what we call lower perceived social support, which just said differently is that the more time that kids are spending on social media, the less they feel like the quality of the support they have from teens is high quality. And that, in fact, is what's predicting the loneliness. It's that perceived low social support. So I think what we're seeing is a little bit of an emotional cascade. School closures and stay at home means that teens aren't seeing their friends as much. They're instead spending a lot of time on social media, which can feel like social contact, but it's actually making a lot of teens feel disconnected and unsupported. And then we're seeing loneliness and depression starting to rise. That's the biggest thing that we're seing is loneliness and depression. And we think it's probably yoked to not enough time with peers and not enough high quality social support and interactions. Mm-hmm. And I want to say one other thing about the study or the data is that, you know, we fully expect that the mental health effects of this pandemic are going to change over time. You know, what we're seeing right now is a snapshot of sort of the first few weeks, which I think for many of us have felt a little surreal, right? Like almost like a little hiatus from real life while real life goes on. A lot of people have said it's like Groundhog Day every day again. But over time, I think we're going to start to see effects starting to accumulate. And so, as I said, we're not necessarily right now seeing that anxiety looks higher in our teens and young adults compared to older adults. But I'm not sure that I wouldn't expect that to change over time. And of course, it doesn't mean that some teens aren't showing increases in anxiety and stress. These are average numbers. Because other stressors are going to start to emerge as these lockdown requirements sort of persist over time. Family conflict is going to start going up. Uncertainty about summer plans is going to start going up. When do we return to school? Do we even get to return to school? Those are the kinds of uncertainties that are going to start to rise over these next several weeks. And those we may start to see increases in anxiety, I think, happening. And we're tracking that in our study too. We're following people all the way through May so that we can have a sense of how this is playing out.
Great. And if people want to participate in the study, where do they go?
Yep, we're still letting younger teens enroll, so 14 to 18-year-olds. There's a link to the study at the upliftnavigator.com website. We've closed enrollment for 18 plus just because we had so many and we're trying to do the follow-up now.
Yep. Okay. That sounds great. Okay. So we're going to move on to Michelle, who's going to address the uncertainty that we are all feeling in this. It's just surreal, like you said, Groundhog Day. It's hard to process it words, right? Like we've never gone through anything like this before in our history. So how, Michelle, from a family unit perspective, how can we help our teens manage through uncertainty and these feelings of isolation that Amy was talking to you about in the study?
Yeah, a great question. I think there's two important parts to that question. I'd like to kind of separate those out. Uncertainty and isolation. I think it speaks well to what Amy was saying. Uncertainty kind of being linked more to feelings of anxiety, and isolation certainly for a lot of people bringing about feelings of depression and kind of lack of motivation, because we all are motivated by social exchanges, and they're quite pleasurable most of the time. So I'll start with the uncertainty piece. That feeling of anxiety and apprehension that comes up with uncertainty, we're all familiar with it. We all feel it to some degree, but it's just been heightened lately because there's so much that's uncertain. We've all lost out on kind of the daily to and fro as we head out of the house and go do our daily routines and come back. All of that's changed, and it continues to change on a pretty daily basis for a lot of us. And so it really becomes not just, a couple of day or a week time limited stressor, but something that goes on for this really chronic path. And chronic anxiety is exhausting. When your body is constantly in that fight or flight mode and doesn't really know what to expect. And so I think it speaks well to what Amy was saying about as this goes on, we might expect to see some of that fatigue set in and start to have some different effects than this initial kind of surge of uncertainty and anxiety. But some things that we can do to help, because we all know that feeling, and I think we're all feeling it, is starting to infuse some amount of consistency back into life, even though what we can do is limited. Kind of take what we can get in these moments. So there's some great schedules I'll reference later, but imposing a schedule on just being around the house is hard to do. The pull of the PJs is intense. I feel that, but kind of moving through that and knowing that creating a schedule that feels somewhat familiar is going to help your whole physiology really relax and start to feel comfortable. And then also doing some really purposeful self-care that takes us out of that fight and flight and lets our body know that everything's fine and we can calm down even just for a short amount of time. So I know for a lot of people, they think like scrolling through social media is that. I wouldn't suggest that. Scrolling through social media actually is a lot of input that can be positive or negative. And so things like taking a walk, doing yoga or whatever your physical activity is, going for a run, doing an art activity, if you or your teen are creative, those are great ways to just give your body a break. And then really addressing, my last two recommendations are really about just addressing the worries. First of all, figuring out what they even are. I know at least for me, through the first couple of weeks, it was just a lot of kind of feeling constantly like keyed up and tense. But I couldn't really put my finger on exactly what the worries were. And it took some concerted time. We know this through research that sometimes you have to really focus in and identify those thoughts, and it takes work. So if you're into writing or journaling, I think that's a great way to just put those thoughts down on paper and then be able to start interacting with them, reframing them a little bit. But lastly, one of the key things in the world of anxiety is just getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and starting to just honor the fact that that's how you're feeling, and that's okay. And certainly now a lot of us are feeling that way. So even just labeling and then affirming. So saying something to yourself like, it makes total sense that I'm worried right now. These are pretty strange times. So noticing that you're feeling anxious and being like, this is fine and expected, can help your body stop trying to like fight that feeling or feel like that feeling is wrong in some way.
Such great advice. I know it's easier said than done, right? To be comfortable being uncomfortable, but I feel like, both as a parent and, as a teen, that is really something that we're just navigating real time, day to day, trying to take one day at a time, right?
I think it's a great point, Anne, that it's a skill. And so the first time you try this, it's probably not going to feel super comfortable. But the more times you try just kind of validating and sitting with those feelings, the easier it gets, for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like it's day to day, right? Like some days I'll be like, okay, I got this. This is great. And then I'll be like, oh, this is the worst day.
Yeah.
We're all doing this, right? Yeah. For sure. Okay. So by the way, everybody, you're submitting some really great questions, very important questions. We're going to try to get to all of them if we can, but please continue to submit them in the Q&A. We've also been seeing some in the chat. You can also do them anonymously if you feel more comfortable doing that within the Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen. So a couple of good questions already in the Q&A about seniors, and we're going to talk about that important thing. Amy, both not only as a clinician, but also as a parent with a senior. This is a topic that is very top of mind. How do we support our seniors sort of navigating the grief of these losses of anticipated social celebrations, proms, sports seasons, baseball no longer, the closure, how do we help them? That was one of the questions too, is how do we help them find closure on the school year that is so unprecedented?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I want to say to everyone out there, I'm seeing some of the questions pop up too, and I know Anne is moderating them. There's one theme running through a lot of questions, which is, yeah, this is all great advice, but my teen is not on board with it. So we're going to handle that directly at the end a little bit, sort of like how to set small goals within a family system, and how to interact with teens who maybe are on a different page about what they want out of this than parents are. So we're not ignoring those questions right now. We will get to them. But specifically on the questions of seniors and navigating loss. So I mentioned earlier that one of the things that we're seeing most strongly among 14 to 24-year-olds is increased rates of depression. Depression is a really common response to loss, and it's part of an expected grief process. And that's, I think, what I want to say is that that's what's happening for a lot of our teens and young adults right now. This is what we're seeing is grief. And we're talking a lot about seniors, high school seniors, but it's important to know it's not just high school seniors. It's college seniors too. I mean, wow, all those years invested in college at a lot of personal cost, financial cost, a lot of investment of time, and to not get that moment to walk across the stage, that's really hard for college seniors too. But it's also 8th graders who were expecting the time to sort of mark their sort of graduation from 8th grade and moving on to 9th grade. And even if your kid isn't a senior, every single kid, not every single, but the majority of kids look forward to a lot of end of year rituals. They're looking forward to the choir trip or the last band concert or the spring musical or their sports season, or even just the end of the year bonfires with their grade. So a lot of our kids are grieving, whether they know that's what they're doing or not. So, and the other thing I want to say is that this is a loss, not just for kids, but it's a loss for parents and families too. Many of us have looked forward to celebrating these moments. We've been there with our kids through all of these big events that were leading up to these moments, and they reflect our investment in our kids, and they reflect our love for our kids, and they reflect our hopes and dreams for our kids, and we're losing those too. So there is just a lot of loss that's happening. So how can we handle it? I think there's 2 things that I would recommend and that I'm trying to do in my personal life too and my clinical life. And the very first one is, and Michelle already alluded to this, So you have to validate the feelings. It's okay to feel lost right now. It's okay to be sad, okay to be mad and feel robbed that you don't get these events. It isn't selfish. Doesn't undermine this sort of awareness that there are people out there struggling with bigger issues, that there are people who are sick or dying or having financial problems, and maybe I shouldn't be here fretting that I don't get the graduation party for my kid. It's okay to be sad about these things. It doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. And it's just a reflection of our investment in our kids and our families that we are noticing these losses. Then the second thing is, what can we do even in these sort of unfamiliar, unplanned times to still honor those important rituals in some way? It's not what was planned or hoped for, but it's better than doing nothing and pretending that, oh, we don't have the big graduation, so nothing's going to happen. Honoring rituals can look a lot different for different families. And so I think the first thing families need to do is spend a little time reflecting on their own family values and identifying what is it about the event that is most important to you and or your child that you're not getting. What was it about that celebration or that ritual that you were most looking forward to? Was it that you wanted the teenager themselves to feel honored and celebrate their accomplishments? Was it that this was meant to be a family time? You were looking forward to the party together, the dinner, the time to all be together? Was it the time with the friends or classmates to have celebrated having gone through all these experiences together? When you know what's most important to your teen or to your family, that can be a piece of informing how then best to celebrate and honor it. Two things help us celebrate and honor important events. The first one is time, and the second one is meaning making. Time really just means making the time to celebrate that event. Can the planned day of graduation become a day of celebration at home? Can family and friends be invited by FaceTime or Zoom to that celebration? We're seeing a lot of people on social media talking about people who have birthdays during this time and taking the time to still have some kind of a celebration. So that would be the first thing, is to not let the day go by, but to find the day, identify the day, and take the time to make it special. And then the question is, what is the way that makes it special for your family? What makes meaning of an event for your family? And that, again, it's going to look different to different people, but often creating something tangible is a way that we can make meaning. This might be a scrapbook. This might be a photo album celebrating the teen's accomplishments. It could be a poster with pictures and sayings. It could be dressing up at home and still taking that family photo that you would have taken at the graduation, venue, but you're going to take it in your living room or on your back porch or wherever, but you're going to dress up and make a moment of it so that you end up with the photo that is what you wanted. So taking time to mark the special events and creating something that sort of memorializes it or makes meaning of it, those are ways in which I think we can still keep some of the important parts of those rituals. It's not the same, it's not as good, but it's better than ignoring it or pretending that, that they're not happening. So those are my clinical recommendations. Don't ignore the losses, but kind of face them head on and name them for what they are. Talk to your teen about what they're missing most. I mean, I'll tell you a personal story. I am mourning the loss of the graduation party. I had been planning my daughter's graduation party for a year. And it's particularly meaningful in our family because her dad died when she was early on in high school. And so she's not going to have her dad at her graduation. And so his family was going to come and all of his best friends were going to come. I had the save the date out in October. I'm mourning that. She could care less, to be perfectly honest. She wants prom. She is spending all of her free time looking up prom dresses and asking, can she have a night where she gets dressed up and has her date over and dances and has a dinner? That's what she wants. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that we won't do some kind of like graduation celebration because I need it, but I need to honor that what she really wants is a day to dress up and have her prom picture. So that's the kind of conversations I think that we're talking about. You want to check in with your teen about what's most important to them. You want to check in with yourself about what's most important to you and find a way to honor and celebrate it within the constraints of what we have.
Definitely. Amy, thank you so much for sharing not only those clinical recommendations, but your personal story. I think we all feel very connected to that, and really it's great to be able to, hear personal stories too about how we're navigating this. So thank you so much. We're about halfway through. We have so many questions to answer. We want to talk next about remote learning. This is a huge piece of stress and anxiety for teens right now, as well as college students. And so we want to address that specifically. And Thomas and Jordan are going to take a couple of different pieces of this with their expertise. So Thomas, to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about academic stress. So a lot in the poll had talked about how people are concerned about falling behind in school or other activities, which creates its own slice of this very complicated onion of stress that we're dealing with right now. So can you help us, how do we help our high school or the high schoolers or college students that are listening right now navigate the stress of trying to self-manage their education at home?
Yeah, it's a good question because stress from distance learning makes a lot of sense right now, given that we're in a very unique and very challenging situation that everyone's been put in. And so high school and college students are having to adapt to that, and it's going to look different for everyone. So some might really struggle to engage with the material. Some might struggle with the fact that distance learning doesn't have quite the same kind of structure. And so what you were saying is, some are fearing that they might fall behind. And so one of the best things that we can do, again, this is kind of a theme that we've been touching on earlier, is trying as best as we can to find some ways of building schedules and keeping things consistent, having some kind of normalcy. And that can look like to-do lists, that can look like daily schedules, something that can try and establish, this is time to get work done, time to study, this is time to work on daily goals. And having that built in so that it's not just, an extended vacation. It's not just you work on school whenever, to again, have some semblance of normalcy. And it's important to remember that part of that daily schedule needs to include regular breaks for yourself, for socializing, for hobbies, self-care, eating, exercising, sleep, all those things. And a lot of times we have to be really intentional about those things because, we're unscheduled. It's easy to let that slip away from us. But it's important to have those times just reflect on all the good effort that everyone's putting in. And the last thing I would say is that social connection is key. It's really important. And so don't let your connections from school, classmates, friends, things like that slip away. Keep in touch with Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, maybe even have distance study sessions where you're able to go through some of the material together, again, to try and get some of that normalcy, some of that scheduling. And that can be a really good, helpful reminder that we're all in this together. We're all putting in the work and we're all trying to get through this.
I think that's great too. And it's something that we try to reinforce in our household is that everyone is feeling overwhelmed. And so if people aren't reaching out to organize that stuff, it's probably because they're feeling overwhelmed themselves. And so Amy, you've talked about that with your daughters, encouraging our teens and you teens listening to reach out to your friends and organize things, even if you're not a typical organizer, because that can help other people feel more connected and it makes you feel good too. Okay, so Jordan, do you want to talk specifically about college students and how we can help our adult college students forced to be home now in an environment with our families when they're, have either just started college or are finishing graduation or somewhere in between?
Sure. So college students are facing many unique challenges right now that are different than what high school students are facing. A lot of college students were in the middle of their semesters or quarters when they were sent home from on-campus housing. I know many students are still debating if they'll even be coming back to off-campus housing or staying home with their family. Additionally, there's been a lot of mixed communication from universities, and the limitations and recommendations also vary from state to state, which is even more challenging to navigate for out-of-state students who are sent home. I know the college students that I currently work with have expressed difficulty with staying autonomous in their family home. So this is a particularly unique stressor for them because they've literally lost their space to do college. And this can be as literal as not having their dorm room desk to do work at, but also having to navigate being back in the family dynamic. So they're expected to do chores or tasks that were not part of their college routine, And they also have different relational roles when at college versus when at home versus at college. So college students right now are having to manage the dual role of being a child who is back at home and also trying to still be that autonomous adult college student all in one space. And another challenge, which Thomas just talked about, is the shift to online classes. I have clients who are already anticipating the difficulty of having to be more on top of their workload, so being stressed about upcoming stress. And then some classes do have live sessions, while some are also pre-recorded lectures. And this requires more flexibility and responsibility on the student's part. On the one hand, students have more freedom to do their classwork and watch lectures when they want, and on the other hand, this provides a lot of unstructured time. And so it can be easy to fall behind. And then as an undergraduate instructor myself this quarter, I've already had students express a lot of concerns. So issues around unreliable internet, not having access to a computer or laptop that has a working microphone and or camera, because that's now required for online classes and meetings. I've had students who've told me they're living in different time zones, so they're worried about online deadlines. And then also the financial stress of losing on-campus jobs. I have students who are picking up off-campus shifts, so experiencing a lot of financial stress.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole webinar on just that alone, Jordan. There's so much to unpack there. If y'all are interested in that as well, let us know, because we are happy to carve out some time for that. Great tips, Thomas. Thank you, Jordan. I think there's so many complexities to having adult children be back at home and autonomous, and also, you know, just the transition. So let's move on to our family systems a little bit. Our next question is from Michelle, and Michelle's going to talk a little bit about what can parents do to support their families and students during this time. So we've seen a lot in the Q&A, right? My kid, I've tried so hard to instill a schedule and they don't want to do it. I'm feeling like they're getting frustrated and anxious. What are some like practical tips that we can offer families for helping start those conversations and, you know, make things better?
Yeah. Motivation's a tricky subject because it means a different thing to each person. And so I think overall, these are some broad tips, but it will be really important that you customize them to your relationship and to your child through a conversation where you can really understand what's important to them. But a couple of broad tips. It's easier to get motivated when we don't do something alone. So we all have the experience of like needing to go to the gym or something like that. And if it's just you going to the gym after work and no one will know if you don't go or not, the chances of that happening are quite low. So anything that you're hoping your child will do, the chances of it happening are so much higher if they have a buddy in that situation. And we're all at home just as families, so that might need to be you, at least to get them started in something new. They could also like call a friend, like if they're going for a walk. Teens, if you like call a friend and talk during that walk, the chances that you actually go out and do it together are much higher. And then when it comes to schoolwork, as Jordan was alluding to, learning in this whole different way can be really anxiety provoking, and knowing that you have a partner in a situation and that you're on a team that are both working towards the same goal can kind of lower a little bit of that anxiety. So even if you haven't done it for a while, asking your child or your teen if they need help with their homework can be a big relief if they do feel like they need some direction. I would also say to be really intentional about building in fun time. It's really hard to wake up in the morning and be excited about your day if all of the things that made your day exciting are now gone. So for a lot of teens, going to school, seeing your friends is the reason why you get up and go to school, and then learning happens there too. So if you don't have peer interactions throughout the day, if you don't have those good things that you're looking forward to, waking up becomes a lot less motivating. So building in those things to get us excited about getting out of bed and putting them as early as possible in the morning so that we can just get up and get that extra push to get our day started. And then for some people, I know I'm one of those people. For some things, rewards can be really important. There's a lot of built-in rewards in school. So like getting a grade or having your teacher, who's someone you value, tell you good job. And a lot of those are taken away right now too. You just kind of send something off via email and there's not a lot of satisfaction with that. So building in those rewards and making sure that you're recognizing the work that your children are doing and really calling it out, saying good job. But then also for some people, it might be adding like tangible rewards. Set up a goal as a team, and then if it gets met, it's something to celebrate with something that's important to the student.
Great. There was one question in the Q&A that's related to this, so we have a couple extra minutes, so let's do that. So how do you sort of build those in, right, that time? Suggestions for building in those rewards? I know you talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that rewards are one of those things that are really family specific. And so there's a lot of things. I think the first place to look is anything that was a part of that your teen's life and now isn't there anymore. And so if you can build that back in, that's fantastic. So asking your teen, what was one of your favorite parts about school, and how can we make that happen at home? What makes you feel like your work is really being appreciated? How can I help you feel like all the hard work you're doing for your homework is being appreciated? And then working together to find ways you can build that in. Or having a conversation about, I want to make sure your work still feels appreciated. What sort of rewards are important to you? I want to be able to show you how important this work is. What would be a cool thing you would want to earn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking about my own personal experiences with that, trying to get creative, because what they really want to do is just go hang out in person with their friends.
Yeah, I know.
So like Zoom and FaceTime, like, I don't know, we're probably getting a little bit of apathy around that, right? Like, okay, this is really great. Sometimes like online shopping right now for spring shop, for the teenage girls or boys that love to shop. Video games that are, the drive-by birthday parties. I don't know. I mean, I just think that those are things that, are rewards, I think, in themselves, because they're unique and different. I
also love like privileges, basically. So like getting to choose, in a family, I grew up with a sibling, and being the one to be able to make the choice for the family on any given night, there was a low chance that I was going to be able to have that. So if that's something that you have power over as a parent, to say, Jim did a great job on homework today, and so you get to choose what we're going to watch as a family tonight. It's your choice of the TV show. Power over the remote is a big thing.
Yeah, definitely. And stress baking. I think we've done a lot of that.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. I know. If you can find flour.
Or yeast or whatever else.
Yeah.
Okay, so on a more serious topic, Thomas, Jordan, what are some of those warning signs that we need to be paying attention to? I know Amy talked at the top of the hour about some of the things in the study, but can you give us a few different things for us to all start thinking about and having conversations about?
Sure. So the first thing is important to acknowledge that, as we all know, this is a very stressful time. And it's to be expected that teens and young adults are not acting 100% themselves, and for right now, that's normal. But parents should try to look for notable changes in mood or behavior. It can be harder to notice those changes in mood, but you're looking for boredom, or maybe you've noticed that your teen has been feeling consistently down or sad. This might look like they're being more quiet than usual, they're withdrawn, or they're not interested in the hobbies or activities that they had before. For changes in behavior, this can look like isolating in a room for an excessive amount of time, not joining in with the family, or not being interested or willing to engage in self-care, such as exercising. And then this can also look like sleeping an excessive amount on top of what is already normal for your teen.
Okay, so sleeping until 11 is not necessarily a warning sign if they're staying up way too late.
Right.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, another warning sign could be if a teen is appears usually on edge, restless, or is having sudden bursts of anxiety. That would suggest that their stress level has gotten pretty high, which again, we're expecting some of that to an extent right now because it is a really stressful situation. But if it's getting to the point where sleep is disrupted, where they're having panic attacks, having some of those other like physical sensations of anxiety, that's when it's getting to a point where it is a reason for concern and where it does seem to be having a really big impact on their lives.
Okay, thank you. So if, Amy and Michelle, so if we recognize maybe we have some boxes that have checked today and during our hour, what resources are available right now? I know you started Uplift Navigator for the very reason of being able to reach more students and kids. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I want to talk about one thing first, which is if I'm starting to be concerned, we're having trouble in the family, or my teen is having trouble, my teen has expressed to me that they're having trouble, is this the time to seek help, or should I kind of wait until things are back to normal? And I think there's a couple of really important things to know about help seeking. It's almost always going to be easier to learn new skills when we're not overwhelmed with crisis. And so my first clinical advice is don't wait for the crisis in the family to start thinking about looking for some resources for your teen or for you as a family. If you're starting to have that little thought in your head, like, I'm kind of worried, this is really not working well, I'm kind of worried about their well-being and their safety, actually probably the time to reach out before it reaches a crisis point when you need immediate help right now and it's not always that easy to get. And second, we just know that accessing clinical care is challenging. You have to deal with insurance, you have to deal with finding the right fit, you have to deal with schedules, you have to deal with availability. It seems like every clinician is full all the time. And for a lot of those reasons, we're actually seeing many fewer people reaching out for therapy right now. And as a clinician, that worries me a little bit because on the one hand, I have all this data that mental health problems are rising among teens and young adults. On the other hand, every clinician I know is seeing the same phenomenon, which is referrals are going down. And so there's a little bit of a mismatch, and I've been thinking on that a little bit. And I think some of it is some of it I think is just the weird sensation of time and meaning that's happening with the stay-at-home order. It's the Groundhog Day phenomenon where things kind of lose their sense of reality. I think we're a little wary about trying something new. But I also think there's a sort of a preconceived idea that therapy is one of those things that you really have to do in person, face-to-face. And since we can't do that right now, we'll have to wait until I could go get my teen or our family in to see a therapist face-to-face. And that's one thing I think that we can provide a little data on. So the evidence is really clear. There's a wonderful organization, we can put it up on the website called, oh, Michelle, I might get this wrong. It's not telehealth.org, but something like that, where they have a list of all the studies that have shown that teletherapy is as effective as face-to-face therapy for pretty much every kind of presenting problem that you can see. The first studies were on depression, but it's now gone to almost every population. And there's some populations and some problems for which teletherapy might actually be more effective than face-to-face therapy. And teenagers are one of those because they don't really like going in the car to talk to some strange adult for 45 or 50 minutes. This is not something they do in any other part of their life. They spend a lot of time on their devices, and so their device is how they access a lot of things. So to them, teletherapy is a really logical fit. Also, depression in particular is something that we think teletherapy may be a particularly good fit for because you can do it from the comfort of your own home and your own bedroom. And for people when they're having trouble with motivation and getting going, getting out, finding a clinician, getting there in person can be challenging. So I guess my clinical advice would be to say, don't dismiss teletherapy if that's what if you're thinking you have concerns about your child, but you're sort of waiting in the back of your mind until you could go find someone in person. I'd probably say don't wait and think about looking for resources now. Michelle's going to talk a little bit. She and I have been partnering on upliftnavigator.com, talking a little bit about some of the resources that we have available there.
Yeah, so I kind of have two set of resources that I would love to chat with everyone about. The first is related to some of the academic questions that I've seen people be posting. It can be hard as now a parent and a stand-in teacher. It's a very different skill set. And so the Khan Academy is a great place to go for some of these pre-made things, the idea of creating your own schedule from scratch or your own lessons plans. There are very talented teachers who spend a lot of time doing that, and so it's a full-time job. Khan Academy has some downloadable pre-made information about that, which is fantastic. And there's also some really great information. I noticed a question about the SAT and the fact that there won't be broad SAT testing. I know it's a big question on a lot of senior and juniors' minds. We'll also hopefully post a link to something called the UW Pipeline Project, which is it's a group of tutors that typically meet in person, but as Amy was saying, we can also answer these questions online. And so they're asking for sticky issues, topics that students would like tutorials for, and they'll be posting those on a Vimeo account. And then of course, Seattle Public Schools has put together a lot of resources. As far as mental health resources, as Amy was alluding to, our team has put together a lot of resources, blog posts, links to great other websites on the Uplift Navigator website. And there's also a list there of a lot of providers who are here in Washington State that are currently taking teletherapy clients. And so if you're looking to get something started right away, that can be a great first place to start. A lot of other practices are also switching to teletherapy in order to be able to keep providing services. And so reaching out to any provider right now and checking to see whether that's something that they're offering is also a great option. There's also something called the Washington Mental Health Referral Service, which is a number that we can post where you can call, tell them a little bit about what's going on for you and your child, and then they'll give you a call back and actually have a conversation and then connect you to some resources that way as well. Sometimes there is a little bit of a wait for that, but usually it's a couple of days. And then for more brief help and crisis help, there's two resources for parents, the King County Crisis Line called Crisis Connections. But for teens, there's also a service called Teen Link, which is not ongoing support, but it's actually teen-to-teen support. So your teen would connect via call, chat, or text with another teen who's supervised by an adult clinician just for in-the-moment support.
That's great. And I know we have other people outside of Washington that are joining this. So every region has their own regional resources as well. So
that's right.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. So we're going to move to the Q&A. We've gotten some awesome questions, and please keep them coming. We have about 10 more minutes, actually 6 more minutes. But I want to address there's one common theme, and Amy, feel free to jump in here too as you're looking at some of the chats. But motivation seems to be a big theme. What is reasonable expectation for teens in terms of motivation? Having them take the lead on, finding activities to do at home, or should we initiate that? What's the balance there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think one thing I want to say, like sort of stepping back, I think both responses, I think when we are in uncertain, anxious times, there are two classic responses. One is to exert control over the situation and try to manage the heck out of it, create a schedule, create a plan, do all the things. And the other is to avoid. Go in the room and play video games. And a lot of what we're seeing right now is that parents take plan A and teens are taking plan B. That's creating a decent amount of family conflict. But I guess the one thing I want to say is that I think actually everybody's trying to solve the same problem, if that makes sense. We're just coming at it in two different ways. And starting there might be a place to recognize it. My 14-year-old, who's one of the most like expressive and insightful people I've ever met in my life, and I'm a 47-year-old psychologist, will say to me when I start getting like this, she's like, Mom, I think that's your own stress and anxiety talking. It's a really helpful thing for me to realize that when we want our kids to be doing this and this and this, some of that is our own anxiety. The one thing I would say is we need expectations to be realistic right now, like, which might mean a little lower than they were 2 or 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, 23 hours a day in the bedroom playing video games is not a healthy lifestyle either. So there's some place in the middle there. And how do we get there? So one thing is, you as a parent, and if you can do it with your kid, what is most important? What is it that we don't want to lose during this time? Is it staying on top of schoolwork? Is that actually the most important value and goal right now? Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. Is it staying fit for your sport for when you're able to go back to it? Is it that your family stays connected, that you don't end up losing those family relationships in trying to keep the grades up or the sport fitness up? You lose the family connection. What's the one most important thing? And then how can we make one step towards that? How can we build that into the schedule that we put together? And so the second thing I would say is you need to find time to sit down with your teen face-to-face out of the bedroom, where we come together to say, here's what's not working and what is it that we want to for? What is it that you can offer? And what is it that I can offer? One of the things I need is I need you to be doing a little bit more homework. What can I do to support you? And what do you need me not to do? Do you need me not to harass you every day about it? Do you need me not to do this? I can take those things away, but what can you offer in exchange? A little bit of a negotiation back and forth. And, you know, ideally we do that jointly, positively. Less ideally, we still as parents have some points of leverage. It may be that access to the Wi-Fi or the video games is contingent on the kid keeping up their end of a reasonable small set of expectations. Maybe it's one chore a day, one schoolwork assignment, 1 hour out of the room with the family. That's the expectation. And once those expectations are met, then access to Wi-Fi and the tablet and the phone come back on. I don't love to use those leverage points if we can find a way to sort of have the negotiated plan together, but those are still points of leverage that parents have.
Yeah, it's great. Good feedback. I think it's hard, right? Expectation, we just got off this hamster wheel of go, 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 high expectations of everything and came to a screeching halt. So it does feel like we got off a treadmill a little bit for sure. Okay, we have time for one more question, and then we will find a way to compile all these questions and answer them in some way. Maybe up on the Facebook page, we can follow up as well in the webinar follow-up since you've registered. I have a high school senior and a college junior. How do you approach the subject of whether they will be going to school in the fall, since that is still such an unknown? How do we help them cope with the stress of the anticipation of that?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I have a senior who is hoping to go away to college in the fall, and we don't know. I mean, I think the first thing is to acknowledge the fact that it's a possibility. That is going to be the first place to start. And that is hard for all of us. I think a lot of us were for several weeks going, yeah, this is hard, but it'll be over by summer. By summer, things will be normal. And we're starting to lose that little bit of hope. And that's an important part of motivation and well-being for all of us, is having things to look forward to. And right now it's a little bit unclear what that endpoint is for things to look forward to. So coping with the uncertainty, I think, is all the things we've been talking about, but putting it out on the table without false hope, I think is an important conversation to start having. If this turns out to be the case, what are some things that we can do? And what is it that we're losing? So we're losing, I mean, you know, I'm a psychologist, I think like a psychologist. On the one hand, we're losing school, right? I mean, that's a loss. And so you can only build back that in some ways. You have online classes and Zoom things, and they're all on their Instagram accounts, you know, connecting with each other. But the other thing is that we're losing something to look forward to. Like that's a bigger idea. What they thought it was going back to school, and maybe that's been taken off the table, but is there something else that we can work together to look forward to? What are other things that have value and meaning for us as people? Is it a goal we're setting for this time? We're trying to work on a new skill or a hobby. We have something as a family that we're trying to create. We're going to plan a great big family Zoom reunion, and we'll look forward to that. It's not the same thing, but we all it's a human need to have something to look forward to. So I think creating those things, even when they're different from what we were looking forward to a month ago, is important.
Great, that's really helpful. All right, well, it looks like we could do another half hour of Q&A. I thank you everyone for joining us today. Like I said, this will be recorded and we will be sharing it out with you, and I hope you'll share with other parents if you find pieces of this helpful for you. We'd also love to know if you'd like for us to do this again on a specific topic. And like we had also mentioned too, this is for informational purposes. If you feel like, someone in your family is struggling, that they should seek help, and we provided those resources, and we'll provide that link in the follow-up to the webinar as well. I want to thank all of our panelists for providing such great feedback and resources for us. And I just want to reiterate, we're all in this together. We're all feeling it. And I hope we'll reach out and connect with others and share what we've learned and have those conversations at home with our teens and young adults. So thank you for joining us. And
Anne, can I say one thing?
yes, absolutely.
So I think because it's our team that'll take the time to do it, but there were a lot of questions that came through that we didn't have time to answer specifically. Many of those had themes. I think we can all commit, the four of us, that we'll take all those questions, compile them, identify the most common themes, and do a little sort of question and answer written form that we can put up on the Uplift Navigator website. We can commit to doing that in the next, today is Thursday, probably by Monday we can commit to doing that. So if your question didn't get answered directly today, we're happy to try and take a stab at it in writing over the next couple of days.
Perfect. And we'll end with that. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Anne.
Bye-bye.